This is SF Moya Prison Lawyer. This is SF Moya Prison Lawyer. SF Moya Prison Lawyer. SF Moya Prison Lawyer. You're on a SF Moya Real Pit. You're on a Real Pit. And we are the voice of voiceless. And we are the voice of voiceless. I have to say that twice so you get it to your mind, because I know you get it. Some of mine, because I know it's something you're not used to hearing. And if you're here in this space right now, you're here because I sent a question out into social media, and you're here because you want to either jump in the comment box and voice your objection, or you want to hear more, or you didn't know and you're here. Whatever reason, I want to welcome you. I want to welcome you into the IGSTS family. I got something to say, family. You're in a grill pit. That's the studio. And the question was, is juvenile slavery okay when the state is a buyer and seller? Is juvenile slavery okay when the state is the buyer and seller? Now, to some people that might be obviously no, but based on the Constitution, then you get the gray area, because then remember they say that there's an exception in it, and the exception is if you committed a crime, you are then turned over to the state and you then become a slave. The reason why this question is in such a wide question right off the bat is because in order for you to take a look at the juvenile conditions, you must take a look at the adult condition. And if it's okay for the adult, then why isn't it okay for the juvenile? With that being said, that's the rationale, right? If you're gonna allow them to convict adults and make them slaves, then all they're doing is ridding the world of what they feel like the waste matter of their cities, states, whatever. And those individuals who are waste matter have children as waste matter. So why isn't it okay to get rid of the children? You've seen this throughout history, but that's not where I'm going with this. My question is simply, is juvenile slavery okay when the state is the buyer and seller of that product? Something to think about. The reason I posed this question, or reason this question became relevant, is because they had a situation where they had kids for cash. Big situation, big, bad situation, where two judges in a Pennsylvania suburb they were getting kickbacks from private prisons, and they came up to like 2.6 million they received to send individuals to prison, or to detention centers. There weren't prisons. But the situation I looked at initially and was like, okay, well, let me see what's going on, because I didn't know. At the time, I was going through my own criminal conviction. And then when the judge was actually convicted, I was in prison, so I didn't really follow the story. So I had to bring myself up to speed. And as I watched the videos, it struck me as odd that there was no people of color involved with the situation. So that made me look at it two different ways. The story was even taken, because now you got to figure out, if you look at statistically, African-American juveniles are disproportionately represented, just like in adult population. Very similar, state to state to state, similar. State to state. So when I looked at it and I seen all these, that were white, Caucasian, that were white, being sold into slavery, it was like, okay, how is this even possible? Well, I looked into the county and saw that the county was predominantly white. Made sense. But then I kept saying, why? Okay, why? Okay, why is this story making mainstream? Because to me, it almost seems like it's an anomaly, right? We have an all-white community, all-white judges sentencing kids to prisons, detention time, which was prisons. They didn't go into a detention room like we were when we were. They went into a facility and they stayed there. And why is this happening? You know what I'm saying? What's going on? Find out it's about money. Find out the judges call themselves tough on crime, and And a lot of people identify because they really want to be tough on crime, because the whole time they being tough on crime, they never consider their children being those individuals going to prison to other people's children, people of color, these bad guys they put on. So it made sense at the time until their children were being incarcerated. So it became a problem. So I was like, okay, I keep following this story, trying to figure it out. To come to find out that the reason the story has made mainstream media is because it's all white, because we know around that area or around the nation, we have a disproportionate amount of juveniles who are going to prison who are of color. This is not an anomaly, because it has happened, and it does happen in all these different areas, but it happens to people of color. So that's why it hasn't made mainstream media. And shame on mainstream media for pushing this out there. But every time there's an individual who's talking about they were convicted as a juvenile, who was railroaded, who was made to testify without having the presence of a family member, who received life sentence, the media has turned a blind eye to that individual. As of recent, they have given it a little bit more momentum. But with this situation, these individuals didn't go to prison. They were sentenced to detention centers, and they complained about just being in a detention center caused them mental anguish. And on top of that, they received $200 million. I just want to put that in perspective. Now, I'm not trying to devalue anybody's experience. I just ask a simple fucking question. Is it okay when the state is the buyer and seller of a juvenile slave? If it's not, then it should be not across the board. I feel like it's not. I don't feel like they should be a buyer of slaves, of juveniles or adults, but that's a whole nother conversation. But we find in this community, 90% white, we had an issue where the judge was giving these juveniles an exacerbated amount of times for petty crimes as petty as and it became an issue. And it became we decided that not only is the issue, we figured out what the problem was. The root of the problem was the judge was receiving bribes or receiving kickbacks, as they call it. The individual who was actually facilitating a part of this development company was actually an attorney. So now you have two judges and you have an attorney involved, all part of the judicial system, all part of this tough on crime. We have one more person that's involved with it, comes out as the female, who's part of forensics, who had been playing around with documents. So we had all this group of individuals, this little posse, this gang, this RICO charge happening within it, and everybody's turning a blind eye to what's going on, because it's under being tough on crime. And nowhere in this is a person of color. And not only do they garner $200 million worth of cash, they make a movie about it, right? Okay, I got it. All right. So my question for those who, I got a little bit more involved in the question I wanted to. The question again is it okay for the state to buy and sell juvenile slaves? Because they're proprietor buyer, and I say no. So for you guys who wanted to answer, who wanted to come in and be mad one way or the other, the answer I feel should always be no. The state should not ever purchase juvenile or adult slaves. Get in the box, write down how you feel. For those who wants to continue with this, what I plan on doing is to show you at least one case where juveniles, African Americans, via the police force, have been recently sent to a juvenile detention center. So they did not decide to get rid of them. They just said that we're not going to utilize these private facilities that give kickbacks. And we really don't, can't chase the money, so you really can't tell me that's not going on. It's because they hide the money so well, right? So if the money doesn't have to come in as a kickback to the judge, it could come in as a contract to his cousin, well, or his wife being part of the board. Where yesterday, I'm like, I know every time you want to play these games and bring up all this shit, but it really happens, it does go down. My conversation is not even that. It's too easy to prove and it's too easy to trace, right? It's not hard to prove that these individuals that call a judge and politicians are taking bribes indirectly, family members' employment, contracts, whatever it might be. We're going to leave it at where it is. What I'm going to do is just show you that as much as they try to not put African people of color into this conversation, kids for cash, which we know it's kids for cash. And I guarantee you, if it was an all black cast, it never would have made mainstream media, and never got the outrage that it received and still receives. What we're going to show is that all these individuals who call themselves prosecutors and judge play kids for cash, but they do it in political equity, right? It's not called kids for cash, but it's the same thing, because capital doesn't always have to be money, in form of money. It could be in form of anything. So kids for cash are individuals being sentenced to these outrageous sentences, and it improves the individual chance to become president, becoming congresspeople, men and women, members, state, federal level, different departments within Washington you receive based on your conviction ratio of individuals. People have run on it. Amy Klobuchar being the most popular version of it, but to many Amy Klobuchar, there's many blacks and whites. I've just did several stories. You go into the box, check them out, about individuals who are utilizing their position to do just this. So we find it not being in kickbacks monetarily, but also being in political equity. So we want to, for this is the broad, this is the uplifting, this is the conversation that involves a little bit of conscious understanding. So it's not for everybody. I'm sure everybody's not going to follow it. Everybody believes that in this case, and like what's unnerving is all these black orgs out here who have not bit down on this to do more research. They're too busy doing other things, I guess. But I told you we're the voice of the voiceless. So we're going to ask these questions. We're going to ask these questions. We're going to look into what happened with these two judges, Cavalieri, he's because it has an Italian last name, and it's Cohen. Two judges in this county who are sentencing juveniles to prison or detention. Sorry, there's a difference, but they're the same. But there's a difference. And the kickbacks, and why hasn't that conversation been explored to a macro scale? And the bigger question asking, who are the other? Because we know in this county we had several individuals, and in fact they claimed that it's still going on. There were individuals who had benefited from this whole deal. So it just created a vacuum, created a void. People felt the void. Individuals who looked on as it was happening, knew it was happening. So we're going to name names when it comes to that. But we're going to ask the critical question of why hasn't this, being that individuals of color have a higher, per capita, higher numbers when it comes to being incarcerated as juveniles and as adults. If this can happen to a technical minorities, white minorities in this system, why haven't we done an investigation to see where else has it happened? And it has happened, and it's really simple to prove. I'm gonna prove it in political equity opposed to monetary, because it's easy. It's hard to find, or or trace money, right? Or connect the individuals for the money. It's not because of transparency. It's not hard to speculate or see obvious connections, but we don't want to get into speculation because then people get mad and they want to further lawsuits or whatever, try to hide the truth, assassinations, whatever you want to play, poisonings. So we want to stay away from speculative as much as we can and stay with the actual factual. The factual is we can trace political equity based on convicting. I use the word convicting, sentencing juveniles to prison. Those who are going to stick and stay, I appreciate you. Those who want to just give me a view, appreciate you too. If you want to jump in the comment box, jump into the comment box. Let me know how you feel. This is SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. It's SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. And I'll be right back. And what I tell you, I don't need 100 million people viewing. I just need you, and you to watch us. Thank you. Be right back. You go ahead and say it now.
You in the grill pit, bitch.
One time, like this. For those who hop and make your one nigga straight loony after taking one.
Accepted quite a few Africans as deities.
SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. Let's take a look at
Judges from northeastern Pennsylvania must pay more than $200 million to the victims of their Kids for Cash scheme. Former Luzerne County judges Mark Civarella sent children as young as 8 to for-profit prisons in exchange for kickbacks. Former juvenile court judge Michael Conahan was also part of the Kids for Cash scandal. Both men pocketed nearly $3 million in illegal payments and are still serving prison sentences. A judge has ordered them to pay $206 million to 300 victims.
So what really got me into it, a friend of mine sent me a YouTube channel link to this individual who did a recent update to this, and I watched it briefly. And again, as this gentleman talked, it struck me as odd that he's a lawyer. He didn't even bring up the fact that the lack of African Americans being present in this, but he had some stuff to say that I thought was relatively interesting. So just going to play briefly his reaction. Just going to start, it's going to lay the basis to the foundation to my conversation. So to bring you up to speed a little bit with him, and then I'm going to in turn take the helm, and then we're going to break down the charges, and then we're going to look at African American juveniles in the system and how they are disproportionately represented, and to make the conclusion or come to the factual understanding that if this has happened to Caucasians, children, juveniles, and you see such it's being turned into this horrible thing that's happened. One time we found it. This is the only time. Not to say it's not happening, but this is one time that it has happened and it's come out. And we know we can go to personal information about people of color who've been victimized by the juvenile system. We can go to allegations. We can go to briefs. We can go to organizations. We can go throughout the criminal justice system and find not just isolated incidents, but find systematic chronic episodes where this has continued to happen, where juveniles have been victimized of color by the system. There's no outrage. There's outrage by the family, but the system not outraged. The system has not tried to correct itself. We're going to find out in Pennsylvania, the system has gone on to try to correct itself. It has not removed these situation, this apparatus, of criminal justice, but they're going to be less. There's going to be less likely to victimize a group of white kids again. But let's just play this gentleman's and his take on things, and see if we can come to understanding how Caucasians feel about this situation. This gentleman being a lawyer, let's see what he's got to say. You know how I feel about lawyers. This is SF lawyer, prison lawyer.
Welcome once again to Leto's Law. Here's Steve Leto.
I had a lot of people send me this story, and I was familiar with the story from before, but this is kind of like an exclamation point at the end. Judges who send kids to detention centers for financial kickbacks ordered to pay over $200 million. Now, they probably won't see any of that money, but it's still a good way to end this, I think. Former judges Mark Ciavarella and Michael T. Conahan are now serving lengthy prison sentences for what became known as the Kids for Cash scandal. I saw it on American Greed, which is a series on television hosted by Stacy Keach, where he talks about different people who've run scams. And this is one of the most shocking and disgusting scams of all time. The story here is from Reason.com. Emma Camp wrote it. For about 7 years, 2 judges in Pennsylvania sent hundreds of children to privately run juvenile detention centers in exchange for financial kickbacks. Some of these kids were as young as 8 years old. On Tuesday, another judge ordered the former judges to pay over $200 million in compensatory and punitive damages to those victims. Now, you might say, but Steve, if these people are being sentenced and they did what they're accused of doing, what's the crime here? Well, the problem is that there's a financial incentive for these judges to lock these kids up. So if it came down to, well, we could let the kid go or we could lock him up. Oh, I get paid to lock him up. I don't get paid to let him go. I'll lock him up. So there's an incentive, D. Keach, where he talks about different people.
I don't understand why he has to explain ethics, morals to individuals. I mean, that just shocked me where he had to break down why it's unethical for a judge. To me, it's a conflict of interest, plain and simple. You know what I'm saying? But it doesn't. So I don't know who his audience is or why he needs to explain it. But he feels like a need to explain it. I just think it'd be rationale. If cops are getting paid to pull people over, if they get an incentive to pull people over, they're going to pull more people over, and it is a conflict, right? You're going to be more unlikely to let a person go than pull a person over because it's incentive based. So, okay.
People who've run scams, and this is one of the most shocking and disgusting scams of all time. The story here is from Reason.com. Emma Camp wrote it. You were convicted of jaywalking. We're going to lock you up. Petty theft or truancy. In what became known as the Kids for Cash scandal, the children were sent to 2 privately run detention centers whose builder and co-owner paid the men $2.8 million, according to the Associated Press, over the course of the scheme. According to testimony from plaintiffs,
now the builder and co-owner of this development was an attorney.
During the class action lawsuit, many of the sentences that the children received were staggering. A 16-year-old kid was sentenced to 11 months for driving the wrong way down a one-way street without a license. Another girl, then 10 years old, was sent to detention for a schoolyard fight with no serious injuries. One child was sent to detention for stealing a Hershey bar, another for writing on a school window with a marker. Now, again, to detention doesn't mean detention like in school, where you get detention, you go sit in a room. We're talking about they were sent to a detention center, which is like a jail for kids. Several plaintiffs testified their sentences were based on entirely arbitrary means, such as the number of birds in a tree outside the courtroom or the number of buttons on a girl's blouse. One plaintiff was sentenced to an additional 8 months in detention after one judge asked him to pick a sports team, and the judge said, "You picked the wrong one." The county court system failed us, said one unnamed plaintiff. They, referring to the 2 judges, abused their power, and in my opinion, should never see the daylight again.
So as African Americans in the United States, this is common for us. So when I saw the story, I was just like, okay, well, I'm definitely, it's just so common now. It's so common. Why are they complaining? This is the type of justice we experience in the criminal and justice system. But when it happens to people of color, it seems to be swept underneath the rug due to the individuals they've placed in power or allowed to facilitate the power that's been given to us so gracefully or graciously by these individuals, these white individuals, Caucasian individuals who's been so gracefully given us power. But like I said, this type of story doesn't make news at all. So let's move on to and break down the actual case itself. For those individuals like myself who are kind of unfamiliar with what actually happened, excuse me, let's just look at the judges, Silverella and Cohen. I did call him Cohen. And let's look at them. We can't go in depth because there's no in depth to what they were scumbags, but we want to just look at the case. So then when we try to make a comparison between this case and other cases like it, it's obvious that first and foremost, you'll think like me, like this can't be the only case. This has to be going on still. And why aren't we macroing it to African-American individuals of color, just individuals of color, juvenile individuals of color, because we have to say that juveniles are individuals of color who are being utilized and sent to prison specifically based on their ability to be commodified, the commodity, their potential to be transferred over to political equity, and that equity to be utilized for political gain. I know that's hard for people to believe. It was more apparent when we talked about receiving money back as a kickback, but when we start talking about political equity, it's like it's too abstract for me to follow. No, it's easy for individuals to follow, and they follow it all day long. They utilize it all day long, and they have main media as the foundation. All these stories that depict African American juveniles as the criminal. All this pseudoscience saying that they are the reasons why. And not getting to the root of the reasons why, drugs and guns in communities, and making that be the positioning, but not questioning where the drugs and guns coming from. Social media, I went to social media because it just seems like when I looked at that Stone Mountain case, and this DA coming in, cleaning the board with the RICO, and the benefit of the judge. But prior to that, you've seen these same individuals on social media, and that itself got over 2 million views. Come on, man. So it just seems like everything is centering around this area where they're utilizing these individuals who haven't formulated thought or understand their potential. They're sending them to prison. But again, the question, I'm not going to even go back to the question, but the question has always been, is it okay? And it can't be okay when we find out it's okay depending on color, depending on race. It's white individuals that we're removing from society and giving them the same time you would give to a person of color, juvenile. It becomes a problem. I have a case that I've been following. Media hasn't been following that case. I'm going to update you to that case because I'm not just throwing out speculative talk. But like I said, we're just going to try to go through the facts of the case to understand what it is, so then we can compare it and then ask yourself a question. Then, like I said, the biggest thing about this platform, I want individuals to walk away and say, I never even thought like that, SM. You gave me something else to chew on. I didn't really look at it from that perspective. That's what we're here for. We're the voice of the voiceless. But when I say we are, I have a co-host, my man Ron B in the middle. He's not here right now, but he'll be back on set with us, kicking the bobo. But right now, we are the voice of the voiceless. You are the voice of the voiceless. It's an opportunity to be heard. So what I want to do is just I want to go through a couple of different AP articles dealing with this school, dealing with this area. You know, a lot of this stuff happened through school. You know, a lot of this stuff became, you know, this officer involved incident. Well, not officer, but student involved incident that got turned over to the police that brought him to detention center. Other social things that brought him to detention center. I think a lot of it centered around the school. You know, so stick and stay. Thank you for the support. SAF Moore, your prison lawyer. This is SAF Moore, your prison lawyer. Welcome back. This is SAF Moore, your prison lawyer. SAF Moore, your prison lawyer. So as I got the story, I looked at that gentleman's YouTube, and it just, like I said, it stuck me wild. I said, let me pull some demographics. It's got to be some black children involved, because he's really not involved in color at all. He's just telling the story. And like I said, for someone like myself who didn't know, this is news to me, because remember, I'm incarcerated during the time and I'm not following that story. I'm worried about my own criminal case. Started doing a little bit of research, and I came up with lessons from Kids for Cash, Lessons from Cash. They did some type of blog. They did like 11 parts, assume, because this is part 11, and they're saying, and this is their last blog on this conversation. Fitting it as the end, because now they received their money. The judges are in jail. Everybody's happy. You know, we saw light on the system. We're not going to go any further than Pennsylvania. It's the only place it is. We only got a couple of bad apples, 2 bad judges. That's the only reform we need to this system. One thing I did learn about this criminal and justice system is that they'll say the reasons why they don't shine the light on all this negative, because they know it's going on. It's like impossible for it not to be going on. Things like this epic proportion, right? They say they don't want to destabilize the faith people have in criminal justice, right? So they're going to convict as many people and have as much rampant corruption as permitted, until, you know, someone decides they're going to blow the whistle. And usually, like I said, when it comes to people of color, it's not happening because they're too busy worrying about dumb shit, right? We're worrying about super dumb shit, and we can't focus in on actually what's going on. So with that being said, let's go through real fast what has led us up to this conversation. So again, I was checking out this blog, and it goes, this is the final blog post in the Lessons from Kids for Cash blog series. The movie, so they were fortunate they got a movie out of this shit. I mean, shit, I guess, chronicles the devastating effects the juvenile justice system can have on youth. Many people who see the film, from the parents to the experts, invariably ask the question: if the film is meant to depict the devastation done to children in the judicial system, the justice system, why are there no kids of color represented in the film? So that was the first thing I asked myself when I looked at the film. I said, you got to be fucking kidding me. It's like, to me, the fact that it is no kids of color, it devalues the conversation. In my mind, it makes me feel like we only care about criminal justice when it's certain individuals. That's just how I feel. So if it's kids of color being incarcerated at And we've always said that. We've always said that if the problem looked different, if the numbers look different, then there would be more outrage, right? So we've seen it in one county in Pennsylvania. We had an issue with judges giving juveniles too much time, and it's total outrage. Outrage to the fact that judges are going to jail. Nobody's got anything to say about that. Outrage to the fact that the people are made a movie. All their trauma is understood, felt, appreciated, and as it should be. But when it happens to African Americans, they deserve it. That goes along with African Americans being murdered, unarmed being murdered. It goes right along with that. Because if you look at my last series of videos, I explained to you that the juveniles or these individuals, their age bracket, if you set up a demographic of these individuals who are being killed and you look just specifically at age, there's a certain age that they're being killed at. There are a certain age they're being incarcerated at. There's a certain amount of time of incarceration being given on an average to ensure that. Ensure what? What do you ensure that these individuals are unproductive? And it's people, when you don't think of it from that understanding, when you've been told that these individuals are a problem, you don't need them in your society, and it's okay to put them in prison. When you, an individual like myself, when I look at something like this, immediately I draw the connections. But let's just go over the data. I'm reading from this, so I apologize for my reading all around. I went to public school, so let me read this to you. Data shows that of the 61,000 youth who are in detentions in 2011, more than 75% were nonviolent, and the arrests of the nonviolent offense were 65% were youths of color. And of those arrested for nonviolent offenses, 65% were youth of color. Of those arrested for nonviolent offenses since 2011, and 2011 is not it's a chronic. The statistics are chronic. They're not. This is not an anomaly. This is 2011. We had spike in blacks. No, this is consistently the issue, right? So we go back to the information again. Data shows that of 61,000 youth who were in detention in 2011. 2011 is when these individuals go off to prison. They're incarcerated, these two judges. Prior to that, from like 2003 to 2007 up to 2009, they're looking at this one county. But we already know back in 1996, 1994, we had Hillary Clinton talking about putting them in prison. In the 2000s, we had this. We had all that legislation being passed by the feds in order to incarcerate juveniles and give them more time. Things like benefit of the gang that she's using now down in Atlanta. All this shit's making, it's the same thing. It's that, like they say, slavery has never been abolished. It just transformed itself. And we're looking at it right now. The thing, people can say that, oh, slavery hasn't been abolished, it's just transformed. But what does it look like? It looks just like this. That's why I started the conversation off asking you about slavery. If it's slavery, is it okay for the state to buy and sell slaves? Is it okay? Oh, yes, it's okay. Okay, what if the slaves are juveniles? Yeah, it's okay. Keep checking the box. Okay, the state's juveniles okay for buying slaves. Then you got to ask yourself the question at the end of the day: is this okay? Is this okay? Because he's not looking at these individuals as people or humans, and that's why I say we start first with the humanity of adults. And then we can work down to juveniles. Because if you don't find that adult to be human, then of course his kids aren't. Of course we can convict them and put them in prison. But no, hold on, wait a minute. When it's a white individual, then it's a problem. Because we don't want that to happen. It doesn't work like that. Okay, let's keep going. The answer is simply, the film is about a case that occurred in Lucerne County, PA, which is over 90% Caucasian. Yet the film does not show the kinds of harms that can befall any youth involved in the nation's juvenile system, where the realities of racial disparities are shockingly clear. And when we say racial disparity, we're not talking about criminal disparity or criminal inequity. We're talking about an equity when it comes to a disparity in the numbers. So we're not saying that juveniles of color commit more crimes. We're just saying that when we looked into juvenile crimes, we find more people of color. Juveniles, adult, it doesn't matter. So this case, the reason why it's so sickening is not the fact that these kids are being incarcerated. The fact that one time you decide to voice your opinion on juvenile justice, it's because white kids got incarcerated. And I've been saying that for the longest. Motherfuckers don't want to listen to this shit. I done say this shit over and over again. If we just change the color of the criminal and justice system, either they're going to secede from this goddamn country, they're going to change the laws overnight, and they're going to start letting motherfuckers out without a problem. You ain't going to have to march for shit. So let's keep going. The W. Hayward Burns Institute recently published a map illustrating the extreme contrast in the rate of detention and incarceration for youth of color versus white comparisons. We're going to get to that map and put it up and show the disparities. And we're going to see that in Pennsylvania itself, it's 9-1. 9 black juveniles opposed to 1 white. So do you think that one white kid that this situation occurred to somehow overarched, went past the 9 black kids? It's impossible. So that's what I'm saying. The conversation now is devalued. It makes no fucking sense. It's like, to me, and like I said, it's like people aren't waking up. So you get these fucking rogue ass chiefs, Bryant, and then we get Fani and Fulton County, and all over the nation, we get these individuals who are bent on sending juveniles to prison. And I'm fine. That's hey, y'all elect them. But my question is, again, I tell you about power, and I told you about institutions, and the institutions of power, in their institutions, they don't show you how to gain power. They don't show you how to administrate power. So these individuals are administrating power against their own. That's why they're in the positions of power, because they're never going to come and utilize those same RICO acts against white folks. Never. You can show and tell them, but dog and pony me all day. I guarantee you the convictions that they put against these blacks are going to get upheld. If they try to go against an individual, a person called Caucasian person, again, not only are they going to be checked and be told who they are, they're not going to stand. You done went too far. You done lost your fucking mind thinking you going to try to imprison some white motherfucker. You better go get those black motherfuckers. They're the problem, not us. Okay. For example, so let's go. So we talked about that this map's going to show a disparity. We don't even really need to see the fucking map to understand what the disparity is. We know what the disparity is. Many studies have shown that these disparities are attributed to factors other than crime rate. And that's all I've been saying to these ignorant ass, stupid ass Negroes. You want to run around and say, we know what the problem is these juveniles, incarcerate. Well, they got you doing their work for them. Disparities are products of the system, policies, and practice. So it has less to do with crime and more to do with these individuals putting in mechanisms that criminalize behavior. And I'm, like I said, to those individuals who think I'm moving too fast, you can rewind the motherfucking tape and follow me. But I mean, you're gonna have to do some research, because I can't baby feed you every fucking thing. These people are corrupt. And like I said, when I seen this story that was sent to me, and I asked a question, and before I even start looking at the data, I just ask myself these few questions, and things didn't ring true. So I knew that there was a cover up, and as much as they try to over cover up things and remove the blacks from the conversation, we see that it's black all over the conversation. Same way with history, the same way with everything they attempted to do. So in this story, when you take it out and you say, 90% of the individuals are Caucasian, we had a problem here. There's no other problems anywhere else. We're not going to do any more investigation. It makes my spidey sense, my arm, I get goosebumps. So let's go a little bit further. For example, the data from the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, OJJ-DP, showed that of the 61,000 youth who were in detention each day in 2011, more than 75% were of non-violent offense. And of those arrested, non-violent offenses, 65% were youths of color. 40 years after it was first passed, the same federal law that was created, OJJ-DP, still requires states to address racial and ethnic disparities. So it just goes on and on and on. Let's just go to the map so we can look at the map real quick before we move on to the actual criminal conviction. But as the map, I'm gonna go to the map. I'm gonna view just the map in general, and you go to a place like Pennsylvania, and we can see that it's 5.6 to 1. You know, the data in general. If we just go to data in general, you want to just talk about racial disparities, juveniles, just nationwide. We can see, I think it's like 9 to 1 nationwide of blacks compared to whites in this system. So, I mean, like I said, to me, it's like, it's really gross that you would present a story to me and expect me to get behind it, watch your films and all that other stuff when you don't even mention black disparities. It's just all about whites. You've been traumatically harmed by this. And it's true. There's no level of disrespect to harm. It's just like harm is harm is harm. So if anything, if you were a racist or you did feel certain ways about criminal injustice, it would have made you a proponent against it, made you an ally against it across the board. But this is how it go. They're going to protect their own. It's SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. It's SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. It's SAF Mo, your prison lawyer. And I'll be right back. Thank you for staying.
But what if it turns out that the greatest threat in this age of catastrophe is that this idea that Americans will pull together in times of crisis is dead, killed by decades of treating American freedom as the freedom to get ahead at any cost?
SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, and we will continue the conversation about is it ever okay, or is it okay for the state to buy and sell juvenile prisoners or juvenile prisoners? Doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? When is it okay? Is it okay? If it's ever okay? Because you have to say that has always been a conversation when it came to males. And since it's okay for us to buy and sell male prisoners, why isn't it okay for us to buy and sell juvenile prisoners? And if it's okay to buy and sell juvenile prisoners, why then is it an issue if they're getting kickbacks for buying and selling juvenile prisoners? And if it's a conflict of interest or whatever, I understand that. I'm not going to argue that point, but I just think you get into a slippery slope when you start saying a male, it can be done, because we know it's being done. You know, they're getting kickbacks all day long for incarcerating individuals who are adults, which you know, and a lot of it has to do with them being slaves, 13th Amendment. So we started with this conversation with it being juveniles because it seems more egregious, but it's egregious as anybody's doing it for any apparent reason, except for in this country because they wrote the 13th Amendment, which allows them to do that. But just back to disparities. When we speak of a racial disparity, it means youth of colors are not being treated equally for the exact same offense. So that's what we have an issue with, right? And we can see it right now in this actual reporting because we can see that this white situation garnered sympathy, a movie deal, a settlement, and people listened. But like I said, we have several cases, or whether we're talking about Marvin Haynes in his case, being a juvenile, being incarcerated. Play a little segment of him, his interrogation, and
hold anybody. Marvin, I'm gonna tell you, at this flower store, it's called Jerry's Flower Shop. Okay? There was a robbery. Man got killed, all right? You know that. I'm promise. No. Don't. Let me talk. Just let me talk, all right? All right? We know what happened. We know who was there, and that was you, okay? And we know where you went after, okay? Now, I know what happened, okay? I know you were the person involved. Okay, let me finish. Okay. I need. You follow me? So what Marvin did is after he went out, he went right through here, he came back up in here. Who? You did. Not me? Yeah, you, Marvin. Now come on now, Marvin. I told you I'm keeping it real with you. I'm being straight up with you, Marvin. See how we know? I'm keeping it real with you. That's how I know. See how I know? I'm saying you saying that I did stuff. I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, Marvin, I'm telling you, you were in the flower store. Okay, well, what? See what I mean? I don't know what you're talking about. You talking about I did stuff. What did? I don't even know what you're talking about. I did. But let's forget about what happened. I'm just saying, this is where you were. This is right where you were at in the flower store, right? You came out of the flower store. You went right up through here. You went in the alley. Right to here. See, how would I know that, Mark? I don't even know what you're talking about. How would I know that, Mark? Come on now. You told me to keep it real with you. I don't want to talk no more. Can I talk to my mom? Huh? You want to talk to your mom? Well, I called a few minutes ago and nobody was there. Can I call her? You want to call your mom? Well, okay. We can try. Let's try to arrange her phone. Take a while. You want something to drink? I don't even know what y'all talking about. Okay. I'm gonna tell my mom what y'all trying. Okay. Well, Dave's gonna try to hook something up with your mom. Okay. All right. So what you said? You want to pay call? What happened to my mom? Well, we'll see if we can't get your phone. Just wait. Okay. Do you want something to drink, Marvin?
Whether we're talking about Marvin Haynes in his case, being a juvenile, being incarcerated, play a little segment of him, his interrogation, and the world didn't react to that. But you got a 16-year-old kid being questioned without a parent and being accused of murder, a heinous crime, and you have no evidence against him. Why isn't the world reacting to that? They don't care. I guess if Marvin Haynes was white, it'd be an issue. Same way, Derek Jordan, his situation, being questioned without an adult present, being accused of a heinous crime, in a police station where they brutalize, where they utilize the same tactics they utilized in Guantanamo Bay, they utilized this police station. In fact, they brought one of the gentlemen from that police station to Guantanamo Bay to utilize his practice of extracting information, specifically for that. So, I mean, and we can go on. Keep going. There's a long list of individuals juveniles, that have been convicted of a crime who don't get the same sympathy or compassion that we find in this story. So, like I said, to me, it devalues the story as a whole. But it also should show African Americans where they stand in this country when it comes to their children. And also, I'm hoping that this story actually validates the last two stories I did, and not have people look at it as like, oh, this is progress. Why are you belittling progress? There's no progress when your whole job is predicated on you either allowing them to continue to kill unarmed black males or sending countless of individuals to prison because you're just fueling their system. And I'm saying, yeah, we have a solution. We definitely have a solution. And if you want to hear the solution, watch my videos. I go through what the solution looks like and what the transitory bridge is. But to continue with understanding this situation, we haven't even really got into the charges yet. The charges are brief and they're really self-descriptive. But like I said, after we hit into the charges, we want to look at how they believe that this is continuing, this kid for cash. I just say that there's individuals, like as we go over the charges, we can look at the satellite individuals around who allowed this to happen, who knew it was happening. And my question has always been and continue to be, if it is going on at this level and everybody's complicit to the situation of allowing it to happen, why is it so far-fetched to believe that you're convicting individuals who are innocent and placing them in prison forever? Except when I started the conversation off, as I read in these legal documents, it's very important for the structure of this institution to stay solid. It's for them to not allow these conversations to happen, to act as though they're not happening, because it keeps the institution intact, right? So this conversation, what we're talking about right now is, they say on any given night in 2017, now we went from 2011 and gave you the numbers. There were 61,000 individuals incarcerated. We knew that 65% of them were African Americans. Now we're saying 2017, we're about to give you numbers for 2017. More than 42,000 youths are incarcerated across the United States, 2017. Youths of colors are significantly more likely to be incarcerated than white youths in 2017. Black youths were 4.6 times as likely as white youths to be incarcerated. Natives, 2.9 times, and Latinos, 1.4, with a 70% of all youths locked up for non-violent offenses. So 70%, 72% of the youths are being locked up for non-violent offenses. We have, again, African Americans leading the way, not Caucasians, African Americans leading the way in this juvenile situation where they're being incarcerated. We have 42,000 individuals incarcerated, yet and still we draw to this one isolated incident. And I'm not, even with these Caucasians, it's not isolated. I'm just saying this incident is what made mainstream TV. People got behind it. They get a movie deal, $200 million. Judges go to jail based on this. And we know if African-American males, juveniles, are 4.6 times more likely, had it happened for them to be incarcerated as juveniles, we know that it's happening to them way more times. But we're not even caring about that situation. So let's get into the actual charges that these judges were convicted of and the players, because it's important for us to realize who the players are so we can then go from who the players are, because remember when they take these judges away, they set up a vacuum. The money's still there. The propensity to continue to lock people up for money is still there. Greed is still there. Who are the new players? I also told you to keep in mind that just because money is not being transferred from one individual to another in order to convict individuals, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's being done in the equity, political equity, right? You know, it's being done because I'm tough on crime. See how many black youths I convicted, even though they weren't guilty. I convicted them. I got them off the streets. I'm willing to do your bidding for you. That's a lot. It's worth a lot more than any money, because now you can start making your bid for Congress member, House member, president, AG, because anybody who runs on those stats, that I'm willing to convict black individuals, send them to jail so white folks can have jobs, streets could be safer. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to worry about anything. And I think the biggest connection we're going to make is probably in the latter videos, where we try to connect it with actual genocide. Because you got to understand, if you give a 16-year-old 30 years, which is a life sentence, you must realize that that individual is totally out of communications. There's no conjugal visits in jail. There's no females in jail. And you make him he's so out of society. Even if he's coming back to society, he's so disconnected from society, he's not functional anymore because you kept him in a cage for so long. So we can make a conversation about genocide, abortion, being utilized, extraction to either reduce population or increase white supremacy. Because the fewer black males you have producing a population, the less you have that population producing, the more in turn the other population's going to be able to produce. And that's going to make things at least a little bit easier when you're killing them. You put them in prison forever. They're undereducated. They're dying they have the highest rate of mortality, both as babies and as grown men. So, I mean, you're trying to figure out a way to get rid of them off the face of the earth. You can't figure out why it's not working, because you're doing everything you possibly can. That's what SFMO got to say. So back to the charges that these individuals were charged with. A statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office from the Middle District of Pennsylvania outlined the charges against the two judges on 26th of January 2009. The judges' names is, and I started off, it's one judge's name, Mark Cavallari. The other judge's name, Michael Cunningham. I want to say Cunningham, but it's Cunningham, okay? The charges outlined in the information describes actions between 2000 and 2007 by both judges to assist in the construction and population of a private juvenile facility. So now you're going to say, when the conversation is going like, oh, that's so old, they're not really sending individuals to private institutions, but they are. They're not at the same rate, or not that private institutions aren't the same fervor as it was recently, or, you know, in the early 2010, 2011, 2014, you know, we're doing private prisons and everybody was investing in them. Right now it's state prisons. So of course state prisons aren't given, judges aren't getting kickback from sending individuals to state prisons, and the counties are sending individuals to state prisons because there's no monetary charge to send a person to prison. There's no benefit. The state doesn't have to, the county doesn't have to pay. If the county had to pay to send individuals to prison, they'd be looking at diversion programs, but they don't. So that's an issue, but that's not the conversation. The conversation is how much political equity is with sending an individual to prison, and how many black juveniles does it take to send for an individual how many black juveniles does it take for you to get a seat in Congress, to get a presidency, to get an AG role, to get a judgeship, to get how many black juveniles do I have to sentence? How many black males do I have to sentence? I mean, that's like how many licks to the center of a Tootsie Roll pop. You understand? And this is the game that they're playing, right? So these individuals right here are doing exactly that. U.S. attorney charged in 2002 Cunningham, who was at the time president judge of the court. He uses authority to remove funding for county operated facilities. Now he gets into trouble with that with another judge he's the judge of the orphan division, because he claims that all the money is being slotted to his juvenile court and not get slotted to him. So he actually attempts to point out the facts, and they get into it. The judge resigns eventually once they actually get charged, and he comes back as a president judge or whatever they want to call him. He comes back for more pay, but the conversation about him, like the conversation is about anybody, there was never an ethical conversation amongst these judges about, you never had a judge in that county that saw what was going on, said, this is unethical, this is immoral. It was about funding. So that just tells you, when you put your faith in these individuals to find right or wrong where their mindset is. It's not an ethics, it's in monetary value. And that's unnerving to think about that. But I'm digressing. So we also have the co-owner, this Robert Powell, who also was an attorney, who was part of this whole deal. He ends up getting time, but just to show you how these individuals work together, and individual and people who, when you start talking about conspiracies and how much it takes, in my mind, it takes more than just one person to make this thing happen. It takes people turning a blind eye, whether it goes to unarmed black males being killed, conspiracy, not following the law, for making backdating paperwork, whatever they might do, whatever they're doing. It's not just the judge, it's not just the prosecutor, it's that whole interworking. So it makes it so when you say, well, they're sitting around at the table masterminding these things, they don't have to sit around at no table. It's just like they understand what's going on, and it doesn't affect them till it affects them, right? It affects one of their own, right? As long as it's people of color, they're gonna keep doing it. But the reason I said it is this Sandra Burlow, a former deputy director of forensic service. Now this brought to forensic service, and she pled guilty to some stuff. But what she did is that she as she became aware that she was part of this action, she backdated documents concerning juveniles defendants. So come on, man. I mean, everybody wants to say the forensics, bringing all the facts. States want to bring all the facts. And I always question, the state bringing all the facts, all these individuals working together, and all these individuals bent on their careers being part of criminal injustice, and them convicting individuals and having no understanding of life. They care less. They care two fucks about Black lives. I guess that's where they came up with Black Lives Matter, because it's just apparent that they could all get together and make this happen. And these are white kids we're talking about. Imagine if it was people of color. It would just this probably would have never came out. It'd all be speculative and conspiracies, and you can't trace the money, and everybody will go to their grave with this lie. So that's just the charges where we brought up against these individuals. Then we started with, so now we're in the charges, understanding where the settlement for the 200 million came from, and then you ask yourself a question: why does this look so different? Why are people upset when it's juvenile white individuals who are being sent to prison? And it could say that the minor the crime, the crimes are minor, jaywalking, whatever. But we talk about African American juveniles who've been given life sentence, who've done nothing, and it doesn't generate the same outrage. But I brought up a case in Quincy, Illinois, and I want to go through that case because there's an update in that case with the judge. So for you guys who haven't been following, the one or two individuals who haven't been following IGSTS, you're in a grill pit, SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, who haven't been following us. I did a case out of Quincy, Illinois, where this judge, there was a bench trial, a rape charge against a juvenile. His last name is Clinton. And I'm just giving you a brief update on it before we go to break and come back where I can actually. So the juvenile goes to a bench trial, gets convicted by a judge. It's alleged, and it's not alleged because he was convicted of a crime. So it's factual that he raped another juvenile. At the time of the case, he wasn't a juvenile, but at the time of the crime, he was a juvenile. So the time they brought charges against him, he had just turned 18. But that night that it happened, he was a juvenile. The female was at a party, high school party. They were underage, getting drunk, and he had sex with her. She said she didn't consent to it. Understanding rape charges, even if she was complicit at the beginning and she decided it was no at the end or during, or when you talked a good game and got you motivated and then didn't want to do anything. If she's not consenting, she's not consenting. No means no, right? So in her mind, there was a particular point during this that she said no, and he did not stop. So that constituted rape. So with that, all the players are white, but I want you to understand, if you haven't watched it, how this case became news. And I'm the only individual other than Quincy, Illinois, because it's big news in Quincy, but they kept a wrap over it to make sure it hasn't hit mainstream media. And there's reasons why, and it goes right back to this, but it's spinning the opposite way, right? Stick and status, SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, and you're a real pit. Welcome back. This is SAF Mo, your prison lawyer, and we're talking about Quincy, Illinois, judge by the name of Adrian. I think it's Adrian. His last name is Adrian, Judge Adrian. He's presiding judge on this case that involves, at the time, he's an adult, but at the time of the crime, he was a minor. What happened is they come to a bench hearing, the judge finds him guilty, and from what I understand, from what I'm reading, they file a motion right after the conviction, a post-conviction motion, which you can file. A lot of times, when you're dealing with public offenders, they don't do that, but you can they file it back to, I don't know if they have it reheard or rehearing or contest something. And after the motion, the judge actually overturned his own verdict of guilty and decided, based on some understandings of the law, because his contention was, if this Drew Clinton, this Caucasian white male who raped this Caucasian white female, was a juvenile at the time, he would only got probation. He would not have jail time. So the system is messed up in his mind. These mandatory systems messed up in his mind, and he's going to do something about it. So the same thing we had going on in Pennsylvania with the kids, the white kids. We had this anomalous situation where criminal justice corrected itself immediately. One incident corrected itself immediately, right? We had these children who were receiving all this time once they got the report. The only reason that it didn't happen automatically was a couple of judges involved when they were filing these ethical issues against these two judges in this county that did not further or check into those allegations when people were making the filings. But when it hit, it caught fire, and they shut that shit down. This situation, we have a judge who's against mandatory minimums. Now, they mandatory minimums, motherfuckers left and right. In fact, they got prisons full of people with mandatory minimums. But it's this white kid who was at the time was a juvenile, with the crime was committed, got probation, but now he's adult. Because he's adult, 2 weeks after the crime, it doesn't matter. He was supposed to get a mandatory minimum, and he's supposed to go to prison. The judge, they'll do a bench trial. Judge Adrian, I don't know how he says it's spelled, like it looks like Adrian. I'm calling him Adrian. Judge Adrian, you can look this up. SAF Mo ain't making shit up. Told you. I don't sing, I don't dance, I don't rap. I like bullshit. I just give it to you raw. Give it to you raw. I don't give it to you at all. And if you don't like that shit, you might as well go find somebody else to kick it with. Because I'm laying the facts down, and I reported on this story a while ago. And I'm not a reporter. I'm the voice of the voiceless. And for this story to get swept underneath the rug is bullshit, right? So this kid is an SO, right? He's a sex offender who has all these laws they go into, and the first thing they utilize is we want these sex offenders off the street. And I guarantee you, prior to this kid who's an adult now being convicted, if you interviewed his family, they would have told you, we want these sex offenders off. Now their son's one, and it's okay that this shit played itself out, because there's certain situations like, going and get drunk and having sex with a female who's juvenile who tells you just don't want to have sex, but some kids make mistakes. But prior to that, they probably still dislike sex offenders, right? They still want the criminal justice, because it's working for them, right? It's working for them. But that's just not it. So they petitioned the court. The court then flips itself. So it's a bench trial. So to me, a lot of this shit is tactical, because it's a bench trial. They already know that this judge is sympathetic to certain things. Bench trial, based on the facts, he had to decide that this guy was guilty. And the facts showed that he was guilty. But then they petition him. It's called a post-conviction petition. They petition him right away. The judge changes his verdict. He can, because it's himself. His reasons behind it now is in dispute. So the dispute, he had to answer to his board, which is kind of, it's no teeth. It's not a criminal conviction. It's like a civil board that he's answering to, because they want him to, they can't have this overturning a verdict stand, right? Because it just draws too much attention to the fact that these judges are corrupt and they can do what they want to do, and that they're not in a vacuum. And usually their decisions are based on either political affiliation, dislike, prejudice, whatever it might be. There's no judge in a bubble deciding cases. Either he's a liberal and he does not believe in the system, and he's trying to right whatever wrongs. There's something going on with it. They're not following the law. They're utilizing the law to get an outcome that they want. So like the police officers do when they do an investigation. So the questions, we'll go through a few questions that were asked. And what they did is they asked questions based on his ruling. And it was all they're trying to do is try to disbar him as a judge, remove him as a judge, because what he did was counter to the ethics and morals of a judge. So one thing they asked, that this is his, he has lawyers and they're rebutting allegations, right? So they're asking him, they said that the facts of the statement is they're questioning the reverse findings of guilt to prevent the defendant from serving a mandatory prison sentence. They're asking, he says, and they said the respondent has been a judge of the 8th Judicial Circuit of Illinois since 2010. So the question, or this petition, or whatever they're getting ready to do, is based on the reversing of guilt. Now remember, I told you it was a white male, white female, it's a juvenile, white judge. The judge decided that he didn't want to give him a mandatory minimum, which means he would go to jail as an SO. He understands the situation, understands how fucked up those laws are, decided that this individual should not have to do that. He decided it. But there's been a string of drug offenses that involves minute pebbles of dope that it was necessary to make sure this individual gets life in prison. It was not a judge who dissented. It was not a judge who reversed it. It was not a judge who thought it was unethical. It was not a judge who thought it was immoral. But this guy thinks it is. Similar to our story in Pennsylvania, working opposite, but yet and still, in Pennsylvania, what I'm pointing out is that with this scenario, there wasn't the same indignation. It would not be the same indignation if it was individuals of color, because my conversation is happening to juveniles of color on a regular basis, and it's still happening because when the opportunity opened itself up, we only talked about white Caucasians in that area being victimized by the system, understanding that there are more people of color being convicted. Okay. All right. So he's going to dispute. He's going to admit, or he's going to deny, or he's not saying nothing to each one of these counts being brought against him. The first accusation, or the first thing he had to affirm, that he was a judge. And he says, I admit that I'm a judge. And I've been a judge since 2010. And then they asked him, they said on October 13th, 3-day bench trial commenced, people in Illinois, whatever. He said, I admit to that. I admit that Drew, I was the judge, and Drew Clinton stood charged with 3 counts of criminal sexual assault. Respondent presided over the trial, meaning the judge presided over the trial. He says, I admit to that. He says on October, the allegations go. This is almost a summons, which is summons where you have to dispute or affirm to create a conflict so they can adjudicate it, right? So it says October the 15th, 2021. Now this is recent. This is something recent that's not in the news. All these people who claim to be whatever, lawyers, whatever the fuck they're supposed to be, don't respond, report on this, because this is how shit gets swept up on the rug. And this is why I got something to say. We are the voice of the voiceless. It's necessary because we're not going to let this shit get swept underneath the rug. Even if 5 people watch this, it's going to be 5 people who know that didn't know prior because what they do, right? So let's keep it going. So 3-day trial, respondent found the defendant, Drew Clinton, guilty of count 1 of criminal sexual assault, count 3, not guilty on the other 2 counts, 1 and 2. After the finding of guilt, the case was continued to January the 3rd, 2022 for hearing on a post-trial motion and sentencing. So he was supposed to go, so he was going to sentencing, but his defendant, actually doing his job, filed post-conviction. Now, most of us who've been through the criminal justice system realize what a post-conviction is once you get in prison, and then you try to file a post-conviction. You can file a post-conviction right after you've been convicted of a crime to challenge the verdict while it's fresh, right now, boom. Instead of waiting, 2 years into your fucking sentence and getting denied by the fucking judge, do it right now. So they did it. Well, that's like criminal justice. This is criminal justice in action for them. But like I said, very few people who I've been with know about it until they actually get their asses into the law library. And some of them still don't know about it. So on January 3rd, 2022, after the post-conviction was heard, respondents, based upon his findings of the defendant, Drew Clinton's guilt, acknowledged that he was required to impose a mandatory sentence of incarceration in an Illinois IDOC upon him. However, the respondent, the judge, informed that he would not impose the sentence, stating, "This is not just. There is no way for what happened in this case that this teenager should go to the IDOC. I will not do that." This is from the judge's own, where this is the record. Can't dispute the record. Got a person taking the record, says this. He admits to it. He admits that he says that. So he admits to the trial. He admits the trial occurred, but he does not admit to the statement. He says that respond back, go back to the transcripts. He said, I don't deny or admit to that. Just refer to the statement. Just go back to the transcripts. Whatever transcript says is what I said. And they quoted from the transcript. So it's just a game they're playing. But he knows what it says. He knows what he said and whatever. Now, the thick of the things, the reason why we're updating this case, because initially I started off talking about it and they had a big thing about it and they've been trying to get him off because he's running for election as a judge, trying to keep his judgeship. So, and making his intentions clear that he was not going to impose the statutory minimum. Now he's going against state law. Now, so one thing I know when I had a case that had a mandatory minimum, and the prosecutor was telling the defense attorney, "This is what we're going to do. We're gonna let him plead guilty to the 2 charges he has. We're gonna let the judge decide." Rarely do you have a judge ever go against mandatory minimums. Rarely. So I already knew when they were telling me this shit, to me, my black ass, it was a setup. Because even if a judge knows, because a judge knows this and they feel like you don't know this, is that even if he goes against a mandatory minimum, because it's statutory, 10 times out of 10, the appellate court's going to uphold that decision because it's statutory. It's already been codified. How is a judge going to go against a statute? His job is to enforce the statutes. So he doesn't have a choice in this matter, right? He has to follow. And he's going to tell you that. I don't care. I don't really feel like this is right, but I have to do my job as a judge. That's what he's going to tell your ass. He's not going to do this shit right here. So depending on what side you sit on, this guy is a maverick or he's fucking insane. I don't know I don't even know what to tell you, but at this particular juncture, the reason I got both of these in the same episode, same segments, because I say a lot of different things and a lot of people might be offended by it. That's why they don't want to watch. I'm like, SFMO, you just said some dumbass shit. We don't believe anything you say. Here's proof. So we see a situation in Pennsylvania, and a situation where juveniles, African-American juveniles, are 4.2 times more likely to be incarcerated. We still see a story about white individuals being incarcerated, and that in turn generates this story about these judges taking bribes, and they're sentencing them to prison time, and everybody's up in oh, it shouldn't be happening. They have to pay this fee, but we don't see any blacks in it, but we know it's happening. More egregious, we find they happen to commit crimes, African Americans, but they're doing life in prison, can't get out because these judges have moved on in their career to different positions. Some of them are chief judges, some of them are political, some of them, they're furthered their career on the conviction of African American juveniles, and that in itself is valuable commodity. We call it political capital, political equity, and you can expend it just like cash. Because when they look at your record and see you tough on crime, you're gonna convict you. If they do the crime, they're gonna do the time, and I'm out playing with them, and that's what our Mrs. Willis is saying back down in Georgia. She's the same thing that Brian is saying up in Ohio. They're saying the same thing. They're doing a bidding for their white oppressor. It's called Negro liberalism, and people can get mad at the fuck as they want. They go watch Charleston White goofy ass talk about this dumbass shit, but this is real shit that's happening, and it's happening for a purpose, right? Because we understand there's 3 positions for a black, female, and white society that the white man realizes that he understands that he's willing to utilize that female for. The first reason is sex. It's what she's good for and what he's willing to accept her in his society for, sex. The second thing he's willing to accept her into his society for is to clean his house. The third thing he's willing to accept her into society is to destroy the black male. We see that happening. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Get in the comment box. Prove me motherfucking wrong. These are the three things that they're willing to accept black females into society. This white society. It's not what I'm saying we are. I'm saying what they are. And you can see it throughout. And that's what that's going to be the floor. Now I drew off a little bit of a conversation, but so there's and making his intentions clear that he was not going to impose a statutory mandatory sentence. Respondents further stated the court should find that the sentencing statute for the offense is unconstitutional as applied to the defendant, but this is not going to be resolved because he already knew there was case law challenging it. So what he did took matters into his own hands. He said that Mr. Clinton, which is defendant, the rapist, has served almost 5 months. 5 months in county jail, and that should suffice. Now they're in Quincy, Illinois, and county jail is not Cook County; it's Quincy County Jail, and it's different in Cook County. So he's probably not even a bad county jail. He's just getting restricted. His privilege is restricted. So here's an incident where we find the system's working for white folks. I mean, shit. I wish the motherfucker told me that my county time was good enough. You know what I'm saying? And that's just enough sun. But there's one more before we end. And for y'all who stand with me and follow me to the end. Now, I said a lot of things about juveniles. And like I said, like it'd be easier for me just to show you a situation where juveniles, and I quoted out some names of juveniles who've been sentenced to life or doing life sentence or doing equivalent to life. Mahdi Ali trying to get out. Right, that was easy. Those cases are making news on a regular basis. But they're not. The media picks them up 40 years later. He's getting. Come on, man. Is that not genocide? 40 years later, this month you putting him back in society. Fucking, he can't even get Social Security. There's a grammar school in Tennessee. It's at the Marysboro, whatever the hell they call it, Marysboro, Tennessee, where we had a similar situation take place. Not mainstream news, and not an old event, but we had it where they were coming in to arrest 3 girls, African American. We had 3 cops, 2 blacks, 1 white, coming in to do this arrest for a crime that doesn't even exist on the books. And when everything comes out and gets to play, it's not going to make any sense. Why the hell are they arresting them? But when you see the arrest rates in this county, and when you see the behavior in this county, it's going to make you understand why this really struck me as odd, that they're all of a sudden utilizing or they go into this Pennsylvania town and it becomes newsworthy, becomes a movie. They get reparations for being victimized as juveniles. I think I did the math. It's 300, it's 200 million. They're all supposed to be getting about a little bit over $600,000 a piece. Like that. With that said, with that first video I showed with the guy from YouTube saying they're not going to get it because the judges' salary's been drastically reduced. One of the judges are at home because of COVID. She should have his ass in fucking prison. They're trying to send everybody else back. My deal is restitution. Ass supposed to be paying restitution. Supposed to be working for 25 cents. Mandatory. Get your ass a job. Work for 25 cents. Whatever shit you have, supposed to be liquidated, taken over, and you're supposed to be paying no motherfucking people back. Period. So fuck the two. They should get all that. And then even when these motherfuckers die, they should be in that state, and their children should be responsible for it. That's how wealth work, right? Children should be responsible for it. But I'm gonna go to this grammar school in Tennessee to show you how when the kids are black, how different it looks. And I think that, like, I guess with the question I initially started, the premise I initially started, I should maybe ask it and direct it to color. Should white kids be sold as juveniles to the state? Or should black kids be sold as juveniles to the state? Because when it's black kids getting sold as juveniles to the state, being incarcerated, nobody has a problem with it. They do, but it doesn't get the same type of momentum. Let's say a familiar prison lawyer.
A much better relationship with the police as well. One of my priorities is to establish that kind of relationship. I'm endorsed by the Minneapolis Police Federation.
Aren't both of you endorsed?
Yes, in
Right,
fact,
that's
my opponent was endorsed before I got in the race, and since then, every law enforcement agency that's considered the race has endorsed me, including the sheriff's deputies, the airport police, the Brooklyn Park police,
I want to go
and the
back
sheriff.
to you. Kids are running around with guns in our county, in our county, in our county, in our county.
Welcome back. This is a familiar prison lawyer. Familiar prison lawyer. Familiar prison lawyer. And in conclusion, we're in Tennessee, where we see a similar incident occur with children of color, from I would say 6 to 11 are the ages of these individuals. What happened is a YouTube video goes out of these two little boys beating up on an older boy. When the video goes out, I don't know how the officers get it, but they don't want to prosecute the kids who are fighting. They want to prosecute the individuals who made the video, right? For reasons I have no idea. But they start this investigation of looking and figuring out who these individuals are. They figure out who it is. This Crystal Templeton is kind of like the investigator who's doing all the investigation to finally come up with these individuals that they want arrested and brought to this juvenile detention center. They go, now you have 3 officers at this the school now, this Hobbs Good Elementary School, getting ready to arrest these individuals. The principal really doesn't know what's going on. The investigator was supposed to be there. She doesn't show up. She's waiting for the kids to jail. You have 3 officers there, 2 blacks, 1 white. The 2 black gentlemen are, one guy definitely doesn't want to be involved with this. The actual school officer calls off that day because he doesn't want to be involved with this. The 2 black officers, one doesn't say anything, the other one's tried to get his superiors involved. They're saying it's going on. The white dude, 100% behind this, leading the charge. He happens to be on SWAT. Why is all this stuff relevant? Why is it going on? Because they end up arresting these kids and putting them in the detention center. And I think they spent like 3 or 4 days in a detention center. And the reason this conversation is so stark, and the reason it attracted to me, and I wanted to put it as a comparison, is because statewide, the average, the cases of juveniles in court is about 5%. In Rutherford County, it's Tennessee, it's 48%. It's off the board. It's crazy. And just to see those stats, I mean, just to show those stats, these are the stats right here. Because it makes sense at the end of the day. Eventually, these individuals who filed the charges and the kid, the family, the adults, the family members was able to sue. People got reprimanded. They didn't get a movie deal out of it. This did not involve any kickbacks, but you got to ask yourself a question. It did. It's that political equity, right? You know, this makes no sense. I mean, this beyond doesn't make sense, because it was a crime that does not even exist, yet and still they feel as though they could arrest these kids, put them in detention, which is prison. We haven't talked about their mental anguish that's been suffered by being incarcerated. They had one of the fathers speak out. They had a community meeting. System failed them miserably. So there was a class action lawsuit filed against, it was 10 children that was part of this. I know 3 girls were going to be arrested, or were arrested. They came to get them. And I'm not sure how much it spawned out of that. But to me, this is a stark example of this hasn't been fixed. Again, we can go back into the county where the conversation initially started with the in Pennsylvania, and see that once these judges were removed, they claim that the Cash for Kids is still going on in that county to a certain extent, not like it was before, but these judges are in positions where they can utilize, or the individuals who stood around and did nothing are being given positions. So, I mean, what do you do? I mean, what's the end? What's the in conclusion? I mean, what am I saying? What are we trying to get at? I mean, at the end of the day, it's really nothing you can say because of the exception in the Constitution allows them to do pretty much whatever they want to do. And it just seems that as long as it's not against a community with any power or political power, that is, then they're going to do it. They're going to roll right over them. And like I said, you see it in Black communities of color, where they can come in and take children. And now the trend is for African Americans, in order to receive jobs or for them to move up in power, have to be acquiescent in this behavior. You don't believe what I say? Let me hear you talk. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm coming up. This is what I'm ending on. It's still going on. This article is I think it's 2021, so it's a relatively new article, and it's not. So in the Black community, we can see that it has not stopped, and it's in full. The motion of the machine is in full motion, as well it should be. And it, like I said, this crime that they were put in detention for had no statutory relevancy whatsoever. And like I said, I'm not sure what sparked this YouTube deal and this video. I don't know why, just weird. They don't really give any background explanation to what triggered it, why they were so intent on prosecuting the individuals who had taped the fight and put it on YouTube. So it's all good. It's SF Moyer Prison Lawyers. SF Moyer Prison Lawyer. It's SF Moyer Prison Lawyer. I'm signing off. I'm about to go smoke. You feel me? We are the voice of the voiceless. Support us. Thank you for your support. I'm out.
Black United Front got created in Philadelphia around that. Then who becomes the spokesperson, the helmsman for this movement? A Democratic Party hack who all the years she's been in the Democratic Party never stood up for African people, never stood up to Rizzo, never said feed, clothe, and house my people. All these African people got behind Wilson Good and elected him as the mayor, didn't they? I mean, people worked like hell to elect and did some fierce political work in this city. And in this city, they had a holdover, a remnant of the movement that didn't get quite wiped out, at least visibly, in dreadlocks and what have you, and everybody called themselves Africa. And it was a real problem for the city of Philadelphia. And so when it became time to get rid of them permanently, it wasn't Rizzo. Rizzo tried it and the people pushed him back. It was Wilson Good who gave the order and bragged about it, and he had a bomb drop on them Africans.
motherfucking grill pit.